Hi everyone, it's me, Twilla, and I'm here with my two sleeping dogs. It's the middle of February in the dead of winter, -20 today in Alberta. And I am sitting here in my little orchid nook that I showed you about a year ago, which I was very excited about, as you may recall. And you know how it is, right? You walk into the orchid store or wherever you are where the orchids have just come in and there's all that burst of color and you're kind of gobsmacked and just like awed by the amazingness of it all. Well, I had gotten all these orchids thinking that they would bloom again and I would have exactly that I felt I had last year. And as you can see, I have some here that are blooming, but truth be told, they're new. And the ones I have from last year are not blooming yet, but they are very healthy plants and I am not despairing. This particular nook of orchids in my house is all Phalaenopsis orchids, or moth orchids as they're commonly called, and they are sold by many people. They're commercially very popular and they're pretty easy to grow. The thing is, the way they move through their growth process is much slower than with other plants. So it takes them a while to first adjust to your home. Then it takes them a while to let you know that they don't like something that you're doing, or conversely, that they really love something that you're doing. So if you're used to growing typical houseplants that have a bit of a faster rhythm, you might tend to overdo the kindness or the tactics or the why is nothing happening, I'm going to try this. And that's definitely what I did. So with some of these new orchids from last year, I killed them with kindness a bit. It's easy to end up with multiple plants, have them in the same space, and then think I can do the same thing for all of them. But that's not actually the case, because they will actually come to you with different circumstances. They may be in different kinds of growth medium. They might be in strictly bark, which dries out a little quicker, or they could be sitting in moss. This one is sitting in moss. It's a new one, and it's in a softer plastic pot, and this is all moss in here. And the thing with moss is that it's both like a sponge, it holds moisture and it pulls moisture away from the roots when there's too much, but it is in a very like conducive to the orchid state for much longer than bark is. So if you have an orchid that's in moss and one that's in bark, you can't really be watering them the same amount or with the same frequency, in my experience anyway. So anyhow, there were some casualties. I killed a few orchids with kindness, but I also rescued some. So that's the thing, you never give up. I had one that I had from before that was really dehydrated. I basically didn't water it for the whole summer. And this is a pretty big healthy plant now. The leaves, when I decided I was going to try to bring it back to life, were maybe this long, and there were only 2 left. But I pulled it out, I cut off all the dead roots, repotted it, really paid attention to it, rehydrated it, and it over the course of a year, look at that, it's a beautiful plant. And I'm hoping that it will bloom for me sometime soon. The other thing I learned, which may be very obvious to many of you, is that orchids often come in a clear pot, like always when you buy them. And I never really thought about why. And the reason is so that you can see the roots. Because when the orchid needs water, these roots here on top are very gray and silver. So I could take a spray bottle and mist that, and they're gonna turn bright green. I'm just gonna pull that right up to the camera so you can see. They're gonna go bright green. We'll check it again in a few minutes. This orchid has been watered recently, and you can see this beautiful bright bit of green and yellow. And when it's light yellow on the end or kind of white, that's new growth. So it's all very positive. So a lot of times when you buy a Phalaenopsis orchid or a moth orchid, you'll get a little tag that tells you to put 3 ice cubes on it once a week for watering. And I don't do that because I don't like the idea of putting the ice near the root structures. But I can see why people have success with that and why growers recommend it, because it's such an easy way to make sure that the growth medium, the moss or the bark, gets wet but not soggy, right? Because the water will melt slowly, it just makes it damp, because orchids don't thrive when there's no air contact and circulation of air. So that's why the pots have slits in the side. They are in nature a plant that grows on other plants. They're an epiphyte, so they like moisture, but they need air just as much. I know some people grow them in water and have success. I haven't tried that, but I'm saying what I'm trying right now is the idea of them being watered regularly, having an opportunity to dry out so the roots go silver, and then rehydrating with airflow. Now, watering, that's something that really tripped me up. So at first I was watering too much, and then I also watered not frequently enough. And so now this is that thing, the orchid gets used to your house, the circumstances in your home. And then once you find the routine that works, like, just kind of stick with it. So what is working for me right now, because I do have, like I said, healthy plants, they're actively growing, is that I am taking these orchids and I am filling their container pot to the top with water with a very, very weak dose of orchid fertilizer. So whatever the recommended dose is for a bi-weekly feed, I'm doing half of that, and I measure it very, very carefully, because these roots are very susceptible to over-fertilization and they will burn if you overdo the fertilizer. So that's why I do that weekly, so W-E-E-K, weekly, with W-E-A-K, weekly. And for me, so far, so good. It's working out wonderfully. So when you have a newer plant like this that comes in this little grower's pot with the moss, which works great for shipping, great for the retailer because they have minimal care they have to do. When it comes to your house, this is solid plastic, except for a little hole at the bottom. And orchids like to have a little airflow, or at least the potential to dry out. So what I did is I drilled very carefully in the side of this pot some holes, just to help with that moss having some opportunity to dry out a bit, because if it stays soggy, you're going to get some root rot. So that's a little tip for when you buy one in the store. And I would leave it in this pot until these totally die back. The blooms I cut off, but where these little joints are right here, it's possible that this orchid will thicken there and send out another bloom. So I'm just waiting to see what happens there. Do you know what really, 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 really likes orchids? And it's such a pain. Mealybugs. Oh my God, they love orchids. And in the past, I've seen a mealybug on an orchid and thrown it out, but I don't do that anymore, because while I am checking for them regularly and dealing with them regularly, they're not doing a lot of damage to the plants, and they don't really fly around very much or move very much. So I am just accepting the fact that I have a little bit of an ecosystem happening here, and mealybugs are part of that. So what I am doing is when I'm watering weekly, I'm handling the orchids, I'm looking at them very closely, and if I see that white fuzzy trace of a mealybug or an actual mealybug, I'm taking rubbing alcohol on a Q-tip or a cotton swab, and I'm wiping the leaf with that. And I'm scraping that bug off, but I'm also getting that alcohol on the leaf, and it doesn't hurt it at all. It just sort of evaporates away. So I get all the little bug and bug residue removed from the leaves, and then I will take soapy water and I will gently just brush the top and bottom of the leaf. And it's really, really helped. I find that I had a couple orchids, I thought, that's it, no, I'm never going to get on top of it, and I have. And so don't give up, just stay the course. I think it's very much a manageable situation. Dish soap is the soap that I use. My house is a very well insulated house. And so in the winter, when it's really, really insulated and sealed in and I don't have a lot of draft or anything like that, it gets quite warm. And Phalaenopsis orchids, in order to produce a bloom spike, they like the temperature to go to 19 degrees or cooler. And I was finding that I actually had trouble getting to that temperature and hadn't really thought about it. So I bought a little thermostat thing. And on here now I can see what the temperature is in this room. Right now it's 19.5, so it's a little bit better for orchids. When I first installed this and got it fired up, I was sitting at 21, 22, so maybe a little bit too hot to produce a flower spike. We'll see. So the thing about growing orchids, and what I know from just gardening and doing like seedlings, is outside the amount of sunlight, the UV, is much, much higher than what you get even next to a window. So let's just totally forget about ever putting orchids outside, because that doesn't work for this part of the world. But one thing that one has to consider when the orchid is by the window is that if it was outside getting even more light, it would have air that is moving. And you know how when you have a hot cup of tea and you blow on the tea cools? In your house, by a super hot window, there's not enough airflow to cool the roots. So you might see damage to the plant. You might see roots that are near the surface withering, and you might see leaves yellowing. So you have to kind of keep tabs on the whole light thing. I thought, given that this is a north-facing window and I've got a lot of shade, I've got like nice low light, like shade, like under a branch of a tree where the orchid might be growing. But I think it's possible I don't have blooms because I don't have enough light. So what I have done is I have a little bit of unsightly, spidery grow light happening here. And this is one that I got to work with in my seedlings in the spring, but I'm trying it out here to see how it's going and if these orchids will respond more with some grow light help. And guess what? All of these orchids that are within reach of this little crazy grow light creature have new growth on them. They're all producing new leaves, and when I pull the clear pots out, I'm seeing new root growth. So I am doing well by supplementing the light here, and I'm hoping that will help me with my blooms. The thing that I would recommend if you try this is this grow light has settings. I think it's got 5 or 6 levels of light. So when you first start supplementing your light, first of all, don't put the light too close to the orchid because it's going to take a while to respond. And if you start to see yellowing, there's no turning back. It's going to yellow. So start it not too close to the leaves and start it on a lower setting. And for me, I left it on the low setting for 3 weeks and I saw no adverse effects. So then I bumped up the light level. And now I think I'm at the highest level on a 5 setting thing. But as you can see, my lights are not that close to the orchid. So that's my update on my Phalaenopsis orchids. I thought it would just be a few minutes, but I've gone on and on. I hope that it was helpful to you. I'm trying to talk about it as being somebody growing in the Northern Hemisphere in a zone 3, zone 4 area with low light in the winter and a long winter. So hopefully that's helpful to you. I am very much a beginner and I'm learning as I go with these, and I have found some videos that have been very, very helpful to me on YouTube. So I've put those in the description box of this video. Do watch them. Again, I am here to speak not as an expert, but just to share my experiences as someone growing orchids indoors on the Canadian prairies. Thank you so much for watching. I hope everyone's doing well. If you're going back to the garden in the spring, the countdown is on, and for orchid growers, there is going to be orchid shows coming up, so hope to run into some of you there. Thanks so much. Happy gardening and happy growing.